Lucky 13. Excuse me, Lucky 13. On this day, following the last day of school, of the school year for my kids, they will next year be beginning grades 7, and 5. So, sunny, beautiful. Went on a little outing, saw the folks in their skipper caps for graduation, which usually is a big hootin' and hollerin' celebration with overflowing two-tier buses and stuff like that, gumming up downtown across all the cities and towns. Well, this year it's a little more subdued in that we now have individual cars with people hanging out of them. I was actually a little pleased. I was a little worried that the cultural enthusiasm for this celebration would be overwhelming to caution, but I have to say it was a nice compromise. People were celebrating and a lot of waving from the sidewalks and a lot of, the usual kind of cultural support of, look, graduates, honk, 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 and wave and stuff like that. And that's great. That all was happening. You could tell people were having a good time, even though the kind of excessive, the group up that you see usually isn't going on. Well, today I am a little trepidatious. I'm facing a summer o' kids, now all sturdy preteens, in also a summer where a lot of the send them off activities are not happening. I don't believe there's stadium sports count this year. I don't think, I know that the Scouts camping trip isn't happening, and I know that some of the other group camp stuff are being handled remotely. Which is to say your kid's not gone. So anyway, I love them very much. Every day this summer, well, we'll see what we can manage. So what about today? How about today? What are the topics? Topic number one, to make fun of myself culturally, yet again. One of the first things that I learned I loved as a detail about Sweden, and as it turns out, the Nordic scene, are these terrible things. Here's just one example, which happens to be among my favorite. It's called Gott och blandat, and it basically means good and plenty. But unlike the candy that I'm familiar with by that name, they're gummies, kind of these sturdy gummies. And the one you just saw is, of course, subtitled Salt licorice. Now, many people whom I've introduced salt licorice to have immediately spat it out and stared at me and glared at me because they did not like being poisoned. I love the stuff. I'm not the only American-born person I know who loves it, but we are few. I think it's fantastic. I even made tequila martinis with basically margaritas using salt licorice liqueur instead of Cointreau, a little bit of lime juice, and of course salt around the rim, and they're awesome. So anyway, I love this stuff, and I try to stay away from it because otherwise I would just be stuffing my face with it, and that's bad. Have I told this story before? I might have, but I like it. 15 years ago, for the first time, setting foot in Sweden at precisely this time of year, and doing a fair amount of riding in a car, if not driving. I had, had the only salt licorice I ever got was when somebody from Cecilia's family would come back from Sweden and give me some. So I was amazed and astonished when we stopped at a gas station. And I remember my wife was in the car, and I came back and I was holding, a pack of these. And I said, they have it here. Like, we found it. We found where they keep it, where they sell it. Now, you must understand that this is the most cheap ass of nasty candy that you could possibly get. You wouldn't serve it to a guest in a bowl. This is really like kid throwaway, gnaw on candy. There's nothing to it. And you can buy it in bushels in any store, any gas station, any kiosk, anywhere. So the thought that I had, discovered where they keep it, we better buy it before, everyone finds out and comes and buys it up. And I'm kind of serious, actually. And anyway, sort of an example of maybe a little over enthusiastic for this. Hardly the acme of confectionery science, but I like them. Turkish peppers. Okay, so humor aside, my thoughtful children have received enough input from their various means of access to start asking questions. And so we ended up having a George Floyd discussion, and we ended up talking about the history of police and so forth, and talking about the police here in Sweden and this kind of thing. Now, what it leads me to think of for this conversation that we're having right now, you and me, is merely some things I would like to know. Now, straightforwardly, murder of people as a general police act isn't really known here. There are single-digit killings at most in here and nearby nations. And so the circumstances I don't even know much about. And that's what I'm trying to talk about. What are the circumstances of discrimination and oppression, which is what it is when the police are kind of habitually carrying out discrimination? That is oppression. And how does that relate to the way the courts function? How does that relate to the way that arrests occur? How does that relate then down the stream to convictions and sentencing and things like that, relative to, bluntly, ethnic issues here in Sweden? Friends of mine here have referred to, the dark bogs of the Swedish psyche. They were referring to habitual racism and ethnocentrism, slightly different issue. And I would like to say that the waters of this bog, as far as I can tell, are nowhere near as polluted and vile as the waters of the United States. But on the other hand, that doesn't mean they're any more transparent. And in terms of actual police activity, in terms of actual policy, in terms of the way things get managed and handled, I don't really find it very transparent at all. Statistics on it. Maybe I should do a little better digging or something, but they're not as readily accessible as one might think. You don't just punch a button and then all the stats pop up for everywhere and you get an idea of what kinds of activities are being done by the police. Now, I'd like to know. I think it's something that every society that currently isn't facing overwhelming military or ecological crisis of some kind should do. I mean, it's a bit of a warning, right, across the water, saying, well, you know what, look to your house, see how things are there. I'm given to understand some of this is going on in Finland at the moment. So, yes, I know there are other things happening. I know about, environmental crises, climate change. I know about COVID-19. I know about lots of things, in fact. But this is a bit of a warning of saying, look, there is no other time than this time to do this. It's always a good time to look at your policing and your justice system and how you do things here, and toward whom and in what way. I know that there have been riots in Sweden before. I know there have been police action. I know that there has been any number of claims, loud ones, that the immigrants brought crime to our shores. Go look at the prisons. Look who's in the prisons. These are quotes from conversations that I've had here. Familiar quotes. The famous magical trick of being heinously lazy and parasitizing our social services and yet somehow also stealing my job. The interesting magical trick of doing that, is apparently widespread here. So here I am asking or wanting to know more about statistics about policing. For similar infractions, are there differences in ethnic groups, economic groups, neighborhoods, regions, different kinds of policing at the different hierarchies and stuff like that? What are those differences, and what patterns jump out, or what familiar phenomena jump out in terms of likelihood of being arrested for X, Y, or Z, likelihood of being sentenced, in a particular way, all of those things, bearing in mind that, prison here is a simply different phenomenon. They're just completely different institutions here than in the US. I get all that. And yes, we have, as far as I can tell, either none or pretty much none of any form of outright execution of, a suspect, if that's the right word, of a human, just by a police officer, just plain execution because they were running or something. I know of no such instances. Somebody will probably correct me. I seriously doubt if it is in, the double digits, perhaps even for more than 1 year, total. But I'm not saying it has never happened. But I want to know more about the sort of more subtle things, the kinds of arrests and the kinds of treatment of arrested people, and the effect on people's lives, and how those things all kind of are parsed by ethnic group, neighborhood, and so on. Those are things I'd like to know. And Swedish people, point me to the right places to find out. I think it's just worthwhile for all of us, particularly in a situation where we aren't facing, these heinous activities that are so pervasive that so many people just call it normal and say, well, they're criminals. What do they expect? We don't have that situation particularly, but there are attitudes here. And if that's another thing, polling. Let's just find out, how do people poll in terms of their positions regarding the treatment or the effects or the events that we may find out about? What are the polling results when we start looking at, for example, people in armed forces, people in security forces, people in police forces? What are their views, and how does that relate to other people's views? All of those things, well worth understanding. So that's my claim, my hope. Maybe someone can help me out. Be nice to know more about that. So that's today. Nice sunny day, beautiful outside. The gardening is kind of amazing with all the things that are planted and growing in our yards. We're going to be champing our way through vegetables like ungulates quite soon. In fact, we already are, but there's more. There's more. They're growing out there. It's like an invasion. Well, it's nice. I hope all is well. Please stay safe. It's Corona times still, and everybody wants to go outside, and everybody wants to group up, and everybody wants to have a cover ABBA band, playing in the park, and everybody boogieing. I know. And it would not be well. We have seen this behavior modeled for us just a month ago across the water, and let's not do it here. All right. Bye, everyone.